About the Swarajists and no changers. So in this lesson we are going to study about the background of the what was the Swarajist and no changers. Then we will study about the Swarajist, who were the Swarajists, then who were the no changers. Then we will study about the Congress Khilafat Swaraj Party, or also known as merely as a Swaraj Party. And then we will study about the Swaraj Manifesto, then achievement by the Swarajist, and then a constructive work by no changers. So let's start with the background of the all this movement, the Swarajist and the no changers. So earlier lesson we have studied about the non-cooperation movement, the Chauri Chaura incident, and then the non-cooperation movement was called off. So after the call off of non-cooperation movement, there was a debate over what to do during the transition period. Now the non-cooperation movement was called off, and it was in its momentum, and at that time only it was called off. So there was a debate that what to do now. Now the non-cooperation movement has been called off. So after Gandhiji's arrest, March 1922, there was a disintegration, disorganization and demoralization among nationalist ranks. So a debate started among congressmen on what to do during transition period. So that is the passive phase of the movement. Okay, so after the Chauri Chaura incident, in that the Gandhiji was arrested, and then at that time there was that time was known as the passive phase of the movement. So the movement was not actually organized. It was disorganized, and it was also demoralized. So at that time the debate was going on what to do now and what will be our next step. So here you can see Gandhiji was sent to jail after the end of non-cooperation movement. So there was two type of sections in the Congress. So one was called as a Swarajist, and then other group was called as no changers, and each group had its own way of working, and they thought that after the call of non-cooperation movement we should start something new. So one group was called as a Swarajist. So let's study about the Swarajist. Who were the Swarajists? So one section led by C.R. Das, Motilal Nehru and Ajmal Khan wanted an end to the boycott of legislative councils, so that the nationalists could enter into them, to expose the basic weakness of these assemblies and use this council as an arena of political struggle. So when the non-cooperation movement was called off, there was one group who was led by C.R. Das, Chittaranjan Das, okay, then Motilal Nehru, then Ajmal Khan. So these three leaders, they wanted an end to the boycott, because you know that when non-cooperation movement was going on, at that time the legislative councils were boycotted, and when they did not take any participation into the election. So these three, C.R. Das, Motilal Nehru and Ajmal Khan, now after calling off the non-cooperation movement, they wanted to end the boycott of the legislative council, so that the nationalists could enter them, to expose the basic weakness of these assemblies. That means they wanted to enter the assemblies, they wanted to enter the legislative councils, and while entering they would go into the assembly and they would expose the weakness of the assemblies, that these assemblies are good for nothing. Actually they are not doing any constructive work. So actually they wanted to participate into the elections just to expose the weakness of the councils, okay, and they wanted to use this council as an arena of political struggle. So they wanted to end or mend these councils, that is, if the government did not respond to the nationalist demands, then they would obstruct the working of these councils. That means either you listen to us or else we will obstruct the working of this council. So this was the agenda to enter into the councils adopted by a Swarajist. Okay, so their only intention was to use the councils as arena of political struggle, and they had no intention to use the councils as organs for a gradual transformation of colonial rule. Okay, so they just wanted to obstruct the working of the councils actually, and expose its weakness, and if it is possible, make the council ready to listen to their demands, and if it is not happening, then obstruct the working of the council. So this was their agenda. So those advocating the entry into the legislative councils came to be known as the Swarajists. Okay, so after the non-cooperation movement, there was two parts in the Congress. One was Swarajist, those who wanted to enter into the councils and expose the council, and those who did not wanted to enter the council, they did not wanted to actually they wanted to boycott the council. So these people were called as no changers. So the Swarajist, they wanted to enter the council. So you can see that mainly it was led by C.R. Das and Motilal Nehru. Okay, and Ajmal Khan. And then who were the no changers? So the no changers opposed the council entry. They did not wanted to enter the council, they did not wanted to participate into the elections. So they advocated concentration on constructive work and continuation of boycott and non-cooperation. So they advocated concentration on the constructive work. So they said that as the non-cooperation movement has been called off, we will work on the constructive part, like we will work for upliftment of the poor people and equality for the society, and we will work against the untouchability, and we will educate the masses politically. So we will work for the political education of the masses. So this was their agenda. So no changers did not wanted to enter into the council, they did not wanted to participate into the elections. So they wanted to do the constructive work and continuation of boycott and non-cooperation. So this was the view of no changers. So they also advocated quite preparation for resumption of the suspended civil disobedience program. Okay, so this school of thought led by Vallabhbhai Patel, okay, led by Vallabhbhai Patel, then Rajendra Prasad, and then C. Rajagopalachari and M. A. Ansari came to be known as the No Changers. So one group, the Swarajists, they were led by C.R. Das and Motilal Nehru, and the No Changers, they were led by Vallabhbhai Patel, Rajendra Prasad, C. Rajagopalachari and M. A. Ansari. Okay, so what was this Congress Khilafat Swaraj party? So the difference over the question of council entry between the two schools of thought resulted in the defeat of the Swarajist proposal of ending or mending the council at the Gaya session of the Congress. So it was decided in the Gaya session of Congress that the councils will be boycotted. The Swarajists, they wanted to put forward their demand into the Gaya session that the council should not be boycotted and we should participate into the councils. But this proposal was not accepted, and the Swarajist proposal of ending or mending the councils at the Gaya session of the Congress was defeated. Okay, so their proposal was defeated into the Gaya session of Congress. Now C.R. Das and Motilal Nehru resigned from the presidency and secretaryship respectively of the Congress after their proposal got defeated into the Gaya session. They resigned from the presidentship and secretaryship, who C.R. Das and Motilal Nehru. So they announced the formation of Congress Khilafat Swaraj party. So they wanted to establish the new party with C.R. Das as the president and Motilal Nehru as one of the secretaries. both sides wanted to avoid a 1907 type split, because we know that there was a split in 1907 at the Surat session. So both sides wanted to avoid a 1907 type split, and realized the significance of putting up a united front to get a mass movement to force the government to introduce reforms. So that's why they resigned from the presidency, who C.R. Das and Motilal Nehru resigned from the presidency and secretaryship from the Congress, and they announced the formation of Congress Khilafat Swaraj Party, and with this party they decided that they will fight the election of the councils and they will enter to the council. So both sides also accepted the necessity of Gandhi's leadership of a united nationalist front. So Swarajists and no changers, they wanted to avoid the split like the Surat in 1907, and both accepted the necessity of Gandhi's leadership of a united nationalist front. So keeping these factors in mind, a compromise was reached at a meeting in Delhi in September 1923. So there was a compromise between the Swarajists and no changers. So the Swarajists were allowed to contest elections as a group within the Congress. Okay, that is, the Swarajists will be a group within the Congress and they will contest the elections. And the Swarajists accepted the Congress program with only one difference, that they would join legislative councils. Okay, now the Swarajists were going to join the legislative councils. The elections to the newly constituted Central Legislative Assembly and to the provincial assemblies were to be held in November 1923. And Swarajists for this election. So the guiding motive of the British in governing, so what was the Swarajist manifesto? While they were contesting for the elections, so what was their manifesto? What was their agenda? So their manifesto was, the guiding motive of the British in governing India is to secure selfish interest of their own country. Okay, so they wanted to expose the reality of the British rule. So the so-called reforms are only a blind to further the said interest under the pretense of granting a responsible government. They said that the Britishers are not going to give us a responsible government. So the real objective being to continue exploitation of the unlimited resources of the country by keeping Indians permanently in a subservient position to Britain. So while they were campaigning for the elections, they were publishing their manifesto and they were telling people the reality about the British Raj. So the Swarajists would present the nationalist demand of self-government in councils, and if this demand was rejected, they would adopt a policy of uniform, continuous and consistent obstruction within the councils to make governance through councils impossible. So this was their agenda to fight the election, that is, they will put forward a policy of uniform and continuous and consistent obstruction within the councils if the demand of self-government in the councils is not accepted. Okay, so this was their agenda. So councils would thus be wrecked from within by creating deadlocks on every measure. So actually they wanted to create a deadlock from within into the councils. So what was the achievement of the Swarajists after entering into the council? So in the November 1923 elections, the Swarajists had managed to win 42 out of 141 elected seats and a clear majority in the provincial assembly of central provinces. So they won 42 out of 141 elected seats and a clear majority in the provincial assembly of central provinces. Remember this may be a question in our exam. So they got clear majority in the provincial assembly of central provinces. So with coalition partners, they outvoted the government several times, even on matters relating to budgetary grants and passed adjournment motions. So now the Swarajists started to work into the council and they outvoted the government several times, even on matters relating to the budgetary grants and passed adjournment motions. So a noteworthy achievement was the defeat of the Public Safety Bill in 1928. which was aimed at empowering the government to deport undesirable and subversive foreigners. So this bill was defeated into the assembly with the help of the Swarajists, and this public safety bill in 1928, and this bill was for deporting the undesirable and subversive foreigners. Okay, so as the government was alarmed by the spread of socialist and communist ideas and believed that a crucial role was being played by the British and other foreign activists being sent by the Comintern. That is, the Britishers started to think that this foreigners are being sent by the communist, they are motivated by the communist ideas. That's why they wanted to bring this bill, public safety bill, in 1928. But this bill was defeated into the assembly. That could not get passed. So what was the achievement by the Swarajists? So by 1924, the Swarajist position had weakened because of widespread communal riots. So there were widespread communal riots by 1924 and split among the Swarajists themselves on communal and responsivist. Okay. So even the Swarajist also got, there was a split in the Swarajist. So there was it was actually on the communal, and it was on the communal line. So responsivist and non-responsivist lines. Okay, so the death of C.R. Das in 1925 weakened it further. So Swarajists lost their leader, that is C.R. Das, in 1925, and this further weakened the Swarajist party. So the constructive work by no changers. So when Swarajists were working in the assemblies, in the councils, at that time no changers were working outside the council. So what were they doing? So at that time ashrams sprang up where young men and women worked among tribals and lower castes, especially in Kheda and Bardoli areas of Gujarat, and popularized charkha and khadi. So the no changers were working for the popularization of charkha and khadi, and this was mainly in Kheda and Bardoli districts of Gujarat. So national schools and colleges were set up where students were trained in a non-colonial ideological framework. We see that the Britishers started lot of schools, but as a part of non-cooperation, a lot of national schools and colleges were set up, and in these national schools and colleges the students were trained in a non-colonial and ideological framework. That is, the nationalistic ideology was imbibed in them during the passive phase of the movement, and this was mainly done by no changers, because no changers opposed the council entry. They wanted to work outside the council and they wanted to boycott the council. That's why they focused on constructive work, and this was their constructive work, setting up ashrams and working men and women together in the tribal and lower caste areas, and then setting up of national schools and colleges, and then imbibing national ideologies into the mind of youth. So significant work was done for Hindu-Muslim unity and removing untouchability, boycott of foreign cloth and liquor, and for flood relief. So no changers actually engaged themselves in a lot of constructive activities like Hindu-Muslim unity. They worked a lot for Hindu-Muslim unity also, then removing untouchability, then boycott of foreign cloth and liquor. The foreign cloth and liquor was boycotted, and flood relief also. So the constructive workers served as the backbone of civil disobedience as active organizers. So they were quite successful in their program. They were able to spread they were actually able to widespread the education and uplift the society and educate the masses on the political activity which was going on around that time. Okay, so that's all about this lesson. So in our next lesson we are going to study about the revolutionary activities in 1920. Okay, so in earlier we have seen the early revolutionary activities, but in next lesson we are going to study about the revolutionary activities in 1920. So in we know that in 1920 Bhagat Singh, Sukhdev, Rajguru, and then the HRA, HSRA, they came up. Then Chandrasekhar Azad, then Ram Prasad Bismil, Ashfaqullah Khan, so the Kakori conspiracy. So this all happened in that 1920s area, 1920s, that decade. Okay, so that's why it is very important. So in our next lesson we are going to study about that. So